he cried in silence. 7 years touching his ear. 7 years of pain that no one wanted to see. His father, a powerful millionaire, spent fortunes on doctors who gave up too soon, until she arrived. A humble employee with cracked hands and a heart too big. And when he saw her pull something out of his son's ear, everything changed. This is a true story of a deaf boy who never was. Give a like if this touched your soul. It's not just a click, it's a silent hug between those of us who have felt pain. Comment how you think this story is going to end. I love reading what you feel, and if you haven't subscribed yet, it costs you nothing. But for us it means the whole world. Thank you for being here. New York slept under a leaden sky when Elena Morales crossed the wrought iron gates of the Alvarez mansion for the first time. Her hands trembled, not from the February cold, but from the weight of the medical envelopes she carried in her bag. $300,000. The E figure repeated in her mind like a constant, painful heartbeat. The structure rose imposing before her. 3 floors of travertine marble, windows that reflected the grey sky without giving back life, gardens pruned with geometric precision that looked more like a mausoleum than a home. There was no laughter of children. There was no music filtering through the windows. Only a dense, unnatural silence that wrapped every inch of that property, valued at $20 million. Teresa Navarro waited for her in the main hall. 62 years old, impeccable black uniform, grey hair pulled back in a bun so tight it seemed to hurt her. Her eyes ran over Eleanor from top to bottom with the coldness of someone evaluating a tool, not a person. "You are 5 minutes late," she said without a previous greeting. Eleanor pressed her lips together. The bus had been delayed. Her previous shift at the restaurant had finished at 6 in the morning. She had slept 90 minutes before coming. "I am sorry, Mrs. Navarro, it will not happen again." "I hope so." Teresa turned on her heels, the dry sound of her shoes echoing like gunshots against the marble floor. "Here we work with order and discipline." Mrs. Isabel demanded excellence. Although she is no longer with us, we maintain her standards. They walked through endless hallways, crystal chandeliers hung motionless, paintings of desolate landscapes decorated ivory-colored walls. Everything was expensive, cold, calculated. Elena felt like she was walking through a museum after closing hours. "You will clean the kitchen, the service bathrooms, the main living room, and the hallways of the second floor," Teresa listed. "You will not enter the library, Mr. Alvarez's office, nor, under any circumstance, the boys' room." Elena nodded, keeping the question that burned her tongue. She had heard rumors. The only son of Alejandro Alvarez, a boy who never went out, a boy who did not hear. "Can I ask?" "No." Teresa stopped in front of an oak door. "Master Mateo has special needs. It is not your business. You will not look at him. You will not speak to him. You will not interfere. Understood?" The hardness in her voice did not allow an answer. Elena looked down. "Understood. Your salary will be deposited every 15 days. You work from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, 6 days a week. If you commit 3 faults, you will be fired without compensation." She took a white apron out of a closet. "The rules are clear. Now, start with the kitchen." Elena changed in a service bathroom smaller than her apartment closet. While she tied the apron, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. 28 years that looked like 40. Purple circles under her eyes, sallow skin from lack of sleep, hands cracked by too much detergent. Her mother would say she was still beautiful. Her mother, who lay in a hospital bed with bone metastasis. She could not fail. This job paid 3 times more than the other 2 together. 3 more months and she would cover enough to keep Carmen in the private hospital. Only 3 months. She worked in silence for 4 hours. She scrubbed floors that already shone. She polished granite countertops without a single mark. She organized cupboards that looked untouched. At 12 noon, while she changed the water in the bucket, she heard something that broke the monotony of that oppressive silence. A sob. It was not the loud cry of a bratty child. It was something more heartbreaking, a contained moan without audible tears, as if the person making it had forgotten how to cry with a voice. Elena stayed still. The sound came from the second floor, from the forbidden zone. Her mind screamed at her to go back to the kitchen. Teresa would fire her if she discovered her, but her feet were already moving, driven by something deeper than fear or reason. She recognized that pain. She had heard it before, years ago, coming from the throat of Javier, her younger brother. She went up the stairs, holding her breath. The second-floor hallway was decorated with black and white photographs. A woman with a bright smile holding a baby, the same woman next to a man with a serious look, the man alone in front of the mansion. In no photo did the older boy appear, as if time had stopped in that birth that took Isabel Alvarez away. The sob came from the third door. Elena turned the doorknob carefully. The room was huge and desolate at the same time. Light blue walls, a single bed with white sheets perfectly stretched, empty shelves, a desk without books, and on the floor next to the window, a small boy surrounded by paper planes. Mateo Alvarez was 7 years old, but he looked younger, thin, pale, with black hair falling over his swollen eyes. He wore grey pajamas that were too big. He was sitting with his legs crossed, pressing his right ear hard, his face twisted in a silent grimace of agony. Elena felt the air leave her lungs. "My God," she whispered. Mateo did not react. He did not turn his head. He did not take his hand away from his ear. Tears slid down his pale cheeks without him making a single sound more. Elena moved forward slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. She knelt by his side, keeping her distance. The boy still did not look at her, lost in his private pain. Then she saw the planes, dozens of them, lined up on the windowsill, all pointing toward the grey New York sky. Some perfect, others wrinkled, all made with the same desperate care. One had fallen to the floor, its wings broken. Elena picked it up carefully. She smoothed the paper with trembling fingers, rebuilt the folds, returned the symmetry to the wings. When she finished, she placed it in the palm of her hand and held it out to Mateo. The boy lowered his hand from his ear slowly. His eyes, dark, immense, full of a pain no child should know, rested on Elena. He looked at the repaired plane. Then, with a cautious gesture, he took it. His fingers brushed Elena's for a second. In that instant, something changed in the room. It was not dramatic. There was no background music or heavenly lighting. It was subtle, deep, irreversible. Mateo held the plane against his chest, and for the first time in months allowed someone to stay by his side. Elena did not know how long they stayed like that, kneeling by the window, sharing a silence that for the first time did not seem empty. When she finally stood up to leave, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Teresa, Elena, jumped up, her heart hammering against her ribs. But when the door opened, it was not the housekeeper who entered. It was a tall man, about 40 years old, wrinkled dark suit, messy hair, and an expression of tiredness that seemed carved in stone. Alejandro Alvarez. His eyes ran over the scene. The new employee kneeling next to his son, Mateo holding a paper plane, tears still wet on his face. "Who are you?" The voice was deep, controlled, dangerous. Elena felt her knees go weak. "Elena Morales." "Sir, I started today. I heard a sound and... Did Teresa not explain the rules to you?" "Yes, sir, but the boy was crying. I thought he needed..." "You thought?" Alejandro took a step forward. "You are not here to think. You are here to clean." The words hit like slaps. Elena clenched her fists, humiliation burning her face. But before she could answer, something extraordinary happened. Mateo stood up. The boy walked to his father and held out the repaired plane. Alejandro looked at it, without understanding. Mateo pointed to Elena, then the plane, then his own chest. The message was clear. She had helped him. Alejandro knelt in front of his son, taking the plane with hands that trembled imperceptibly. He searched in Mateo's eyes for something he had not seen in years. Connection. "Did she do this?" he asked, knowing his son would not hear but needing to say it. Mateo nodded. Alejandro stood up slowly. When he looked at Elena again, the fury had disappeared, replaced by something much more complex, confusion, pain, a hint of hope he did not dare to name. "You may leave," he finally said, "but tomorrow, come at the same time." It was not a firing. It was a second chance. Night fell over New York with its usual indifference. Elena reached her 300-square-foot apartment in Queens after 7. 3 floors without an elevator, damp walls, windows that let the cold in. But it was hers, or it had been, before mortgaging it twice to pay for the first rounds of chemotherapy. Javier waited for her at the table, surrounded by books, 17 years old on a scholarship at university, studying medicine with the ferocity of someone who knows that education is the only way out of poverty. "How was it?" he asked without looking up from his notes. "Strange." Elena dropped her bag. "That place, it's like time stopped." "Did they fire you?" "Almost. But there is a boy, Mateo. He is 7 and he is deaf." Javier looked up. "And?" "He was crying, pressing his ear." Elena sat down, tiredness weighing on her bones. "Exactly like you used to do." Javier's face darkened. He remembered. The sleepless nights. The pain that made him scream until he was hoarse. The doctors who diagnosed infections without looking further. Until a young ear doctor new to the health center decided to look deeper. A severe blockage. Years of unnecessary suffering. "Elena, it's not your problem. I know. That boy has access to the best doctors in the country. If there was something." "I know," she repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. They ate in silence, reheated lentils, yesterday's bread. After Elena took the night bus to the university hospital, her mother shared a room with 3 other terminal patients. The smell of disinfectant and hopelessness filled every corner. Carmen Morales was sleeping or pretending to sleep. Her body was a shadow of what it had been. 100 pounds of yellow skin stretched over bones. The cancer had spread to the liver. Without a transplant, they gave her 6 months. With a transplant and in a private hospital, years, maybe decades. Without money, a city grave. Elena took her mother's hand, feeling the fragile bones under the skin. She closed her eyes and let the tears come, silent, just like Mateo's crying. "Hold on, Mum," she whispered. "Just a little longer." When she returned to the apartment, Javier was already sleeping. Elena stayed awake until dawn, looking at the cracked ceiling, thinking about a boy who pressed his ear and about doctors who stopped looking too soon. The days became weeks. Elena learned the unwritten rules of the Alvarez mansion. Walk without making noise. Do not look directly at the master. Never ask about the late mistress. Teresa ruled with an iron fist, assigning her the most degrading tasks, watching her with the suspicion of a jailer. But every day, at exactly 12, when Teresa went down to supervise Mr. Alvarez's lunch, Elena found a way to pass by Mateo's room. She did not enter. She did not speak. She only made sure the boy was okay. And every day Mateo waited for her by the door. He did not do it openly. He sat on the floor with his planes, but always facing the entrance, with that dark and hungry look of someone who has been alone too long. When Elena passed, he lifted a plane. She nodded, a silent ritual, a connection that grew in the margins of permission. On Friday of the 3rd week, Elena noticed something disturbing. Mateo had red marks around his right ear as if he had been pressing it too hard. He walked leaning to that side, his face pale, his lips pressed tight. That night, Elena did something reckless. She searched the internet, read medical articles, compared symptoms. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Chronic pain of unknown origin, possibly related to an undiagnosed blockage or infection. She had to tell someone. But who? Teresa. Who would fire her for disobedience? Alejandro, who had barely spoken to her again. The answer came by accident. The following Monday, while cleaning the office, Teresa had fallen sick and no one was supervising. Alejandro entered abruptly. He came from a meeting, his phone still in his hand, tension visible in every muscle. He stopped when he saw her. "What are you doing here?" "Teresa asked me to clean, sir. She is sick." Alejandro nodded distractedly, dropping into the leather chair. He looked like he had not slept in days. Elena should have left. She should have taken her rags and disappeared. Instead, she spoke. "Mr. Alvarez, can I ask you a question about Mateo?" Alejandro's gaze hardened. "No, please, just one." "I told you no. Has anyone checked if he has something blocking his ear?" The silence that followed was dense like lead. Alejandro stood up slowly, every movement loaded with a contained fury that made the air vibrate. "How dare you?" The voice was barely a whisper, but it cut like glass. "How dare you enter my house, ignore my rules and question medical decisions made by specialists that you could not pay for in 10 lives?" Elena stepped back but kept her gaze. "My brother had the same symptoms. Everyone thought, 'Your brother is not my son.'" The scream echoed in the room. "I have spent fortunes. I have flown to 6 countries. The best neurologists in Europe have examined Matteo. They all reached the same conclusion. And you, a housemaid without education, think you know more. The words fell like stones. Elena felt tears burning her eyes. But she held them back. She would not give him that satisfaction. You are right, sir. Excuse my boldness. She took her things and left before her voice broke. In the hallway she leaned her back against the wall, her hands trembling, her heart torn between anger and helplessness. But as she walked toward the stairs, she did not see Alejandro Alvarez collapse in his chair, his head in his hands, repeating in a low voice, "What if she is right? God, what if she is right?" Alejandro did not sleep that night, nor the next. Elena's words echoed in his mind like funeral bells. Has anyone checked if he has something blocking his ear? It had been so simple, so direct, so obvious, and no doctor had done it. He remembered the visits, the firm diagnoses delivered after superficial reviews, Matteo's frustration when they tried to examine his ears, the crying, the silent screams, and the doctors, always so sure, ruling, "It is the trauma of congenital deafness, psychological reaction. Give him time." No one had insisted. No one had looked beyond the initial diagnosis, including him. Guilt ate at him worse than the alcohol he drank until dawn. Isabel had died because she trusted incompetent doctors. Had he condemned his son for the same reason? Wednesday morning, with bloodshot eyes and trembling hands, Alejandro called the university hospital. He asked to speak with Dr. Peter Hudson, an ear doctor, whose reputation was based not on his prestige, but on his obsessive care. "I need you to examine my son," he said without preamble, "and do not take no for an answer." Elena knew nothing of this. She only knew that on Thursday, when she arrived at work, Teresa received her with a poisonous smile. "Mr. Alvarez requests to see you in his office." Elena's heart fell to her stomach. This was the end. He would fire her with a terrible recommendation letter. She would never find another job that paid so well. Carmen would be transferred to the public hospital. The end was written. She went. Up the stairs like someone walking to the gallows. Alejandro waited for her standing by the window, looking at the garden where Isabel had planted white roses that no one cared for anymore. He looked different, smaller, more human. "Miss Morales," he said without turning around, "I have made an appointment for Matteo, with a specialist, tomorrow at 10. Elena blinked, unable to process the words. "Sir, you mentioned your brother, your experience." Alejandro finally turned around. "I need you to come with us, to explain to Dr. Hudson what you observed." "I am not a doctor, sir. I have no credentials. I am not asking you for a diagnosis. I am asking you to defend my son when I did not know how to do it." His voice broke at the last words. Elena then saw what pride and money hid, a father destroyed by the fear of having failed again. "I will be there," she said simply. Alejandro nodded. For a moment it seemed he would say something more, but Teresa appeared at the door, her face a mask of disapproval. "Sir, the architect is on the line. Tell him to wait. He insists it is urgent." Alejandro sighed. He looked at Elena one last time. "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock sharp. Do not be late." Elena left the office with trembling legs. In the hallway, Teresa intercepted her. "I don't know what game you are playing," she hissed, "but I warn you this family does not need saviors, and it certainly does not need someone like you who—" "Teresa." Alejandro's voice cut through the closed door. "Enough." The housekeeper pressed her lips until they became a white line. She turned around and went down the stairs with a military step. Elena stayed still, processing the impossible. They had given her a chance, only one, and on it depended whether a 7-year-old boy just might be able to hear. That night when she visited her mother, she knelt by the bed and prayed for the first time in years. She did not ask for miracles. She only asked not to be wrong. In the mansion, Matteo slept, restlessly, pressing his ear even in his dreams. And in his office, Alejandro held a wrinkled paper plane, wondering if he was about to save his son or break his heart once more. The university hospital rose like a fortress of glass and concrete in North New York. Elena arrived 15 minutes before the time, with her uniform clean and her hair pulled back, trying to look more professional than she felt. Alejandro waited in the parking lot, Matteo next to him. The boy wore a light blue shirt and, dark pants, but his face showed the terror of someone who has learned to associate hospitals with pain. When he saw Eleanor, something in his expression changed, not exactly relief, but recognition. He held out his hand. Elena took it without hesitation. "Thank you for coming," Alejandro murmured. He looked like he had not slept. They went up to the third floor in silence. Dr. Hudson's office was modest. White walls, framed diplomas, a table with blue paper stretched out. The doctor himself was a man of about 50, bald with metal-frame glasses and an expression of infinite patience. "Mr. Alvarez." He shook Alejandro's hand. "And this must be Mateo." He knelt in front of the boy, staying at his level, without invading his space. Mateo backed away instinctively. "I understand you have had difficult experiences in hospitals," Hudson said, although he knew Mateo did not hear. But the tone, the gestures, conveyed calm. "Today, we are going to go slow, very slow, and if at any moment you want to stop, we stop, okay?" Alejandro translated into basic sign language. Mateo hesitated, then nodded. Dr. Hudson looked at Elena. "You are Miss Morales. On the phone, Mr. Alvarez mentioned your observations." Elena felt all eyes on her. The weight of responsibility threatened to crush her. "My younger brother suffered chronic ear pain for years," she began, her voice trembling. "Doctors treated him for infections, but the pain continued. He constantly touched his right ear, cried at night, shrank, back when something pressed it. Exactly as Mateo does. And what did they finally find? A severe blockage, impacted earwax. No one had looked deep enough because they assumed it was just a recurring infection." Hudson nodded slowly, without contempt or skepticism. "Mr. Alvarez, did the previous doctors try a direct ear exam?" "Yes, but Mateo reacted very badly, and everyone concluded that with the confirmed congenital deafness, there was no reason to insist." "I see." Hudson turned to Mateo. "I'm going to need to look at your ear. It might be uncomfortable, but not painful. Will you let me try?" Mateo shook his head vehemently, backing up until he hit Elena's legs. She bent down, taking him gently by the shoulders. She had no words that he could hear. She only had presence. She took off one of her earrings, ampon small, silver, and held it in front of Mateo. Then she pointed to her own ear, the earring, and finally to Mateo. The message was simple. "I have ears too. I have been checked. Too. You are not alone." Mateo looked at the earring. Then he looked Elena in the eyes, searching for something adults rarely offer children. Truth without lies. Elena nodded. She would not lie. It might hurt. It might be difficult, but it would be worth it. Mateo took a deep breath. He nodded. Hudson worked with a patience that was almost reverent. First, he let Mateo touch the instruments. Then he allowed Elena to hold his hand. Finally, with slow movements, he began the exam. The scope slid into the left ear. Mateo tensed but did not move. Hudson observed in silence, then withdrew the instrument. Congenital deafness confirmed. The left ear has a structural malformation. He paused. Now the right. Mateo squeezed Elena's hand until it hurt. When the scope touched the right ear canal, his whole body shook. Hudson frowned. He adjusted the angle. His expression changed. "Good God." Alejandro stood up. "What? What's happening?" "There is a total blockage. The eardrum is completely blocked." "I cannot see the eardrum. This is not a simple build-up." "What does that mean?" Alejandro's voice trembled. "It means we need to do an immediate cleaning, with light sedation so the child doesn't suffer." Hudson looked at Mateo with something that looked like pain. "This blockage has been there for years." "Years." Alejandro dropped into the chair, his hands covering his face. Elena felt tears burning her eyes. She was right. God, she had been right. "When can you do it?" she asked, surprised by the firmness of her own voice. "Right now. I have an operating room available." Hudson turned to Alejandro. "Mr. Alvarez, I need your consent." Alejandro looked up. His eyes were red. "Do what you have to do. Save my son." The procedure lasted 40 minutes that felt like hours. Elena and Alejandro waited in the recovery room, facing each other, without words. The silence between them was no longer hostile. It was the shared silence of two people suspended in the same abyss of hope and terror. When Hudson finally came out, he carried a small jar in his hand. Inside, floating in saline solution, was something the size of an olive. A solid, dark, compact block. Impacted earwax, he said. It probably started as a normal build-up that was never treated. Over the years it solidified, pressing against the eardrum, causing chronic pain and completely blocking the hearing. Alejandro looked at the jar as if it contained his own condemned soul. And now we wait for him to wake up from the sedation, and then we will know if the ear has auditory function. If, Elena took a step forward, is it possible it won't work? The prolonged blockage can cause permanent damage, but the structure of the ear looks intact. There are reasons for hope. Hudson paused. Your son has been living with constant pain for years, Mr. Alvarez. At least now that torment is over. They took them to where Mateo was resting. The boy lay on a small bed, a blue sheet up to his chest, his face pale, but calm. For the first time in years, there was no tension in his features. He did not press his ear. He did not shrink in pain. Elena sat by his side, taking his hand. Alejandro stayed standing, unable to get closer, as if he feared his touch might break something fragile. 20 minutes passed before Mateo began to wake up. First they were small movements, fingers that flexed, eyelids that trembled. Then his eyes opened slowly, confused, looking for something familiar. He found Elena. His lips formed a silent word. She understood. Where? Before she could answer with gestures, Dr. Hudson entered. He walked to the opposite side of the bed, out of Mateo's visual field. He lifted his hands, and he clapped. Once, twice, 3 times. Mateo turned his head. His whole body stayed still. His eyes opened so wide they seemed to occupy his whole face. His hand let go of Elena's and flew to his right ear, touching it with disbelief. Hudson clapped again. Mateo sat up suddenly, his breathing fast, his chest rising and falling. He looked at Elena, then at his father, then at the doctor. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, and then, with a voice that was barely a hoarse whisper, out of tune. Beautiful. I heard. Alejandro Alvarez, the man who had built an empire without shedding a tear, fell to his knees. His hands covered his face as he sobbed with a violence that shook his whole body. Years of guilt, of failure, of self-imposed pain poured onto the white floor of the hospital. Elena wrapped her arms around Mateo while the boy cried too, not of sadness but of wonder. He could hear his own crying. He could hear the sobs of his father. He could hear the hum of the lights, the distant beep of machines, the murmur of the world that had always existed outside his reach. Hudson withdrew silently, closing the door behind him, leaving them in their private miracle. When Alejandro could finally speak, he crawled to the bed. He took his son's hands with a tenderness. That seemed like prayer. "Forgive me," he whispered. "Forgive me, son, forgive me." Mateo did not understand all the words, but he understood the tone. He understood the love. He stroked his father's wet face with small fingers and answered with the only word he knew for sure, "Dad." The first time Alejandro Alvarez heard his son call him that, he knew that no fortune, no empire, no professional achievement would ever compare to that moment. Elena moved away to give them space, but Mateo took her hand, refusing to let her go. She was part of this. She had seen his pain when no one else looked. She had insisted when everyone had given up. That night, when they left the hospital, New York shone under a clear sky. Mateo walked between his father and Elena, looking at everything with new eyes. The cars that sounded, the people who talked, the wind that whispered through the trees. He stopped suddenly in the middle of the sidewalk. He closed his eyes, and he smiled. "What is it, son?" Alejandro asked. Mateo opened his eyes, amazed. "I hear my heart." And in that instant something else changed. Something that none of the three could have predicted. Alejandro looked at Elena, not as an employee, but as the woman who had given his son back to him. And Elena looked at Mateo not as someone else's child, but as the child she had chosen to save. Families are not always born of blood. Sometimes they are born of love that dares to see the invisible. Alejandro's gratitude knew no limits. The day after the operation, he called Elena to his office. On the desk was a white envelope. "This covers all your mother's medical debts," he said without preamble. "The complete treatment, including the liver transplant when it is available. And this," he slid another document, "is your new contract. as Matteo's official caregiver. The salary is 5 times your current pay. Elena looked at the papers, unable to process the words. $300,000. Gone. As if they had never existed. Mr. Alvarez, I did not expect... I know, that's why I'm doing it. Alejandro leaned back in his chair. You saw what I refused to see. You heard what I refused to hear. You gave back to my son something I thought lost forever. No amount of money pays for that, but at least I can make sure your mother receives the care she deserves. Tears rolled freely down Elena's cheeks. Thank you. God, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Alejandro became serious. Matteo will need speech, therapy, audiology, educational support. He will have to learn to communicate verbally after 7 years of silence. It will not be easy. I will be with him every step of the way. I know. For the first time, Alejandro smiled. That's why I trust you with this. When Elena left the office, she found Teresa waiting in the hallway. The housekeeper had heard everything. Her face was a mask of contained fury. Very clever, she hissed. Manipulating a vulnerable man, taking advantage of a child's suffering. It was not manipulation. It was compassion. Something you clearly do not understand. Compassion? You came here looking for money, and you found it, right? I came looking to save my mother, and along the way, I saved a boy who was suffering. If that offends you, it is your problem, not mine. Teresa took a step forward, her eyes shining with malice. This family has rules. It has order. I have been maintaining everything running for 15 years, and you, in a few weeks, think you can... Teresa, Alejandro's voice cut through the air. In my office. Now. The housekeeper turned pale. She looked at Elena with pure hate before obeying. Elena did not hear the conversation, but she saw Teresa come out half an hour later with a stony face. From that day, the silent war began. Little things, tasks assigned at the last minute, biting comments in front of other employees, hints about Elena's true intentions. But Elena had something Teresa would never have, Matteo's trust. The boy clung to her with the devotion of someone who has found a safe harbor. During speech therapy sessions, when he got frustrated trying to form words he had never heard, Elena was there. When the hearing aids overwhelmed him with too much sound, she taught him to breathe slow. When he missed having easy conversations in sign language, she learned along with him. Carmen, for her part, was transferred to the private medical center. Private room, top-level medical team, priority waiting list for the transplant. For the first time in 2 years, she smiled without pain. My girl, she said, taking Elena's hand. My brave girl. I only did the right thing, Mum. No, you did the difficult thing, which is much more important. Weeks melted into months. Matteo progressed amazingly. His vocabulary grew day by day. He began attending an inclusive school where children with and without disabilities learned together. He made friends. He learned to laugh out loud, the sound filling the mansion that had been dead for so long. Alejandro watched the transformation with wonder. The house had music again. He installed a piano in the living room. Matteo sat for hours pressing keys, discovering melodies. One May afternoon, while Elena helped Matteo with homework, Alejandro entered the living room. He stayed at the door simply watching, the 28-year-old woman leaning over the notebook, the 7-year-old boy concentrated on the letters, the afternoon sun bathing them both in golden light. Something moved in his chest, something he had not felt since Isabel. He did not say it out loud, not yet, but he knew. He was falling in love with Elena Morales, and the idea terrified him as much as it filled him with hope. Teresa Navarro had built her life around control. For 15 years, the Alvarez mansion had been her kingdom. The employees answered to her, not the master. Domestic decisions passed through her hands. Even Alejandro, in his pain, had delegated everything to her. And now, an outsider without education or proper manners had destroyed that empire in a matter of weeks. She could not allow it. She began discreetly. She investigated Elena's past, her absent father, the debts, the multiple jobs. She searched for something, anything she could use. But Elena was frustratingly clean. There were no scandals, no lies, no dark secrets. Then Teresa changed tactics. If she could not destroy Elena with her past, she would destroy her with her present. She began planting seeds, of doubt. Casual comments in front of other employees about how Elena manipulated Mr. Alvarez, hints about her true ambitions, rumors about her romantic interest in a man so far above her position. But Alejandro did not take the bait. He was too busy rediscovering his son. It was then that Teresa conceived something darker. One Saturday afternoon, while Elena visited her mother at the hospital, Teresa approached Mateo in the garden. The boy played with his new ball, constantly adjusting the hearing aid that was still strange to him. "Mateo," Teresa said with a honeyed voice, "do you want to see something special?" The boy looked at her with suspicion. Teresa had never spoken directly to him. "There is a hurt bird in the basement. I think it needs help, but it is a secret. Do not tell anyone yet, okay?" Mateo hesitated. He loved animals. Elena had taught him about birds. They had watched documentaries together, fed pigeons in the park. "A bird?" "Yes. Come, I will show you." She led him toward the old part of the mansion, the section that Alejandro had declared off-limits years ago. The basement was dark, dusty, with wooden beams that creaked threateningly. Teresa had been there the night before, loosening one of the floorboards near an open window that looked out onto a stone courtyard 3 floors below. "It is over there," she pointed toward the window. "Do you see it?" Mateo approached with caution. Indeed, there was a bird on the sill, a sparrow with a twisted wing, chirping weakly. Teresa had put it there with tape. The boy moved forward, focused on the suffering animal. His weight pressed the weakened board. It gave way. Mateo fell forward with a scream, his hands desperately searching for something, anything. His fingers found the window frame, but they slipped. His body tilted dangerously over the void. Teresa watched, paralyzed. For a horrible second, she wondered if she really wanted the boy to fall. The answer filled her with horror. A part of her wanted it. But before she could move, another voice tore through the silence. "Mateo." Elena had returned early. She had looked for Mateo and heard voices in the basement. Now she threw herself forward, her body moving by pure instinct. She threw herself to the floor, her hands grabbing Mateo's wrists, just as his fingers lost their grip. The weight of the child pulled her toward the window. Elena screamed, her arms burning, her body sliding over the splintered wooden floor. But she did not let go. She would never let go. "Help me!" she screamed at Teresa. "For the love of God, help me!" Teresa stayed still, as if hypnotized. 3 seconds. 5. 10. Then she reacted. She knelt, grabbed Elena by the waist and pulled. Together, they dragged Mateo back to safety. The boy collapsed on the floor, shaking, sobbing. Elena hugged him so tight the boy could barely breathe. Tears fell on Mateo's hair while she repeated over and over, "You're okay. You're okay. I've got you." It was then that Alejandro arrived, alerted by the screams. His face turned pale seeing the scene, his son shaking, Elena with bleeding hands, Teresa standing by the open window. "What the hell happened here?" Teresa opened her mouth, but no lie came. She could not after seeing the abyss. "It was an accident," she whispered. "The floor is rotten." It gave way. Alejandro looked at the broken board, then the open window, then at Teresa. His eyes narrowed. "Get out of my house. Now." "Sir, please, I have been here 15 years, and in 15 years you never opened that window. You never took anyone to this basement." He approached until their faces almost touched. "I know what you tried to do, and you are lucky that Elena stopped you before I had you arrested." Teresa backed away, her face falling apart. "Pack your things, you have 1 hour. And if you ever think of approaching my family again, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life regretting it." The housekeeper left the basement like a ghost. 1 hour later, she abandoned the mansion with a small suitcase and no recommendation letter. 15 years of service ended in 60 minutes. That night, Alejandro sat with Elena in the living room while a doctor bandaged her hands. Mateo slept on the sofa, his head in Elena's lap, refusing to let her go. "I owe you more than gratitude," Alejandro said in a low voice. "I owe you my son's life. I only did what anyone—" "No." Alejandro took her unbandaged hand. "Not anyone. You. Only you." Their eyes met. Something passed between them. A silent recognition that the line between employer and employee had blurred irrevocably. Elena withdrew her hand gently. "Mateo needs me." "I know." Alejandro nodded. That's why I won't ask more of you than you are ready to give, but both knew it was only a matter of time. The call came at 4 in the morning on a Tuesday in June. Eleanor woke with the phone vibrating insistently. Dr. Santos's voice was calm but urgent. We have a compatible. Deliver for Carmen. She needs to be at the hospital in 2 hours. Elena dressed with trembling hands. She left a note for Matteo, who slept in the next room. He had moved to the mansion a month ago with his own suite. Alejandro intercepted her in the hallway. I heard the phone. He wore a dark robe, his hair messy. I'm going with you. It's not necessary, sir. Alejandro, please. After everything we've been through, call me Alejandro. Alejandro, Elena repeated, the name strange on her. Tongue, I will be fine alone. I know, but you shouldn't be. They drove through a deserted New York. The streets shone under orange lights. Eleanor looked out the window, her lips moving in silent prayer. I'm afraid, she admitted finally. It's normal. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose her? Then you will have done everything humanly possible to save her. Alejandro kept his eyes on the road. I didn't do that. I gave up too soon with Matteo. You didn't. That's why your mother has a chance. Carmen waited in pre-op, small and fragile in the hospital gown. Her eyes lit up when she saw Elena. My girl. Elena collapsed next to the bed, hugging her carefully so as not to disconnect the monitors. You are going to get better, Mom, I promise. You already healed me, Carmen whispered, when you stopped carrying alone, when you accepted help, when you allowed yourself to love again. Elena pulled back, confused. Love? Carmen smiled weakly, looking to where Alejandro waited, discreetly at the door. I'm not blind, daughter. I see how he looks at you and how you look at him. Mom, it's not... It is okay to love again, Eleanor. Isabel would want that. Carmen stroked her cheek. The dead do not need our loneliness. They need us to live for them. Before Elena could answer, the nurses arrived. It was time. The surgery lasted 14 hours. Alejandro never left. He bought coffee, forced Elena to eat, distracted Javier when he arrived from university. They waited in that sterile waiting room, joined by the shared terror of losing someone loved. At 8 in the evening, Dr. Santos appeared. He still wore the surgical cap, the mask hanging from his neck. His face was tired but calm. The surgery was a success. The liver is working. Now we need to wait 72 critical hours, but all indicators are positive. Elena collapsed into Alejandro's arms. He held her, not caring about the curious looks, while she cried years of fear and hope against his chest. When she finally pulled away embarrassed, Alejandro simply handed her a handkerchief. Cry all you need, you have earned it. Carmen spent 2 weeks in intensive care, then a month in recovery. Elena divided her time between the hospital and Matteo, running from one place to another, exhausting herself to the limit. It was Alejandro who finally intervened. Carmen will move here when she is discharged. I cannot ask you that. You are not asking. I am offering. He pointed toward the third-floor windows. There are 20 rooms in this house. 19 are empty. It is absurd. It is too much. It is fair. Alejandro moved closer. Elena, let me do this, please. The plea in his voice broke Elena's defenses. She nodded, unable to speak. 3 weeks later, Carmen Morales was discharged. Alejandro had bought a house with 2 floors in the Upper East Side, 10 minutes from the mansion, completely furnished, with a private nurse and all necessary medical equipment. It is yours, he said simply, forever. Carmen cried. Javier cried. Elena could not process such generosity. That night, while she put Matteo to bed, the boy asked, Elena, are you going to leave? Never, honey, I promise you. And are you going to marry Dad? Elena choked. What? Who told you? No one. But he looks at you like in the movies. And you do too. Matteo yawned. It would be good. That way you would be my real mom. Elena did not know what to answer. She kissed his forehead and turned off the light, her heart beating with a mix of fear and longing. In his office, Alejandro looked at a photograph of Isabel, beautiful, radiant, eternally young. I know this does not replace you, he whispered. It never will. But I think she is bringing me back to life, and I think you would want that. The photograph did not answer, but in the silence of the night, Alejandro felt something he had not felt in years. Permission to be happy again. Summer arrived in New York with its suffocating heat. Matteo turned 8 with A party in the garden full of noisy children, colored balloons and laughter that would have been unthinkable a year ago. The boy who had lived in silence now sang, out of tune, while opening presents. Elena watched from the terrace, a permanent smile on her face. Carmen was sitting next to her, stronger every day, the color returning to her cheeks. "It is beautiful to see him like this," Carmen murmured. "It is. And you look different too. Lighter." Elena looked at her mother. "What do you mean? A year ago you carried the world on your shoulders. Now you allow yourself to breathe." It was true. The debts had disappeared. Her mother was healthy. Matteo prospered. For the first time since she could remember, Elena slept all night without jumping. "I'm afraid to get used to it," she admitted, "that everything will disappear. Happiness is always scary, because it means we have something to lose." Carmen squeezed her hand. "But the alternative is worse. Having nothing at all." Below, Alejandro played soccer with Matteo and his friends. He had taken off his coat, rolled up his sleeves. He laughed when he missed a goal, celebrated with loud hugs when he scored. He was a transformed man. When the party ended and the parents picked up the exhausted children, Alejandro went up to the terrace. He found Elena alone. Carmen had retired to rest. "It was a good day," he said, dropping into a chair. "The best." Matteo asked if he could sign up for piano lessons. Elena smiled. "He has a good ear for music." "Ironically," Alejandro paused, "I want to take you all on vacation, all three of you. Matteo, you and me. Somewhere where he can hear the sea." "Sir." Alejandro, it's not appropriate." "Why not?" "Because I am your employee. Because people will talk. Because you are afraid of what you are feeling." The words fell between them like stones in still water. Elena stood up. "It's not fair." "I know. None of this is fair." Alejandro also stood up. "It's not fair that Isabel died. It's not fair that Matteo suffered 7 years. It's not fair that you had to sacrifice your youth for your mother. But here we are, and something beautiful came out of all that pain. Why can't we accept it? Because you still love your wife." "Yes, I will love her always." There was no shame in his voice. "But I can also love you." The change from you to thee was deliberate, intimate. Alejandro took a step forward. "Elena, I am not looking to replace Isabel. I am looking to continue living, and I want to do it with you." Tears ran down Elena's cheeks. "I'm afraid." "Me too." Alejandro took her hands. "But I've learned something this year. Fear does not disappear by waiting. It is only conquered by acting." He leaned his head slowly, giving her time to move away. She did not. When their lips met, it was soft, tentative, a kiss that tasted like a promise and second chances. When they pulled apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. "What is Matteo going to think?" "That we are finally doing what he has been waiting for months." Elena laughed through tears. "This boy is too smart. He takes after his father. How modest." Alejandro smiled, truly smiled, in a way Elena had never seen. "So, is it a yes? To the vacation?" "It is a yes. To everything." That night, Alejandro went to the garden where Isabel had planted white roses. Elena had revived it, caring for it patiently. The flowers bloomed under the full moon. "Thank you," he whispered to the sky, "for bringing her into our lives, for giving me permission to love again, for Matteo, for everything." The wind stirred the roses, and Alejandro chose to believe it was an answer. September brought a new phase. Matteo would start 3rd grade at St. Patrick's School, an inclusive institution known for successfully integrating children with disabilities. Elena accompanied him the first day, more nervous than Matteo himself. "What if no one likes me?" the boy asked in the car. "Impossible. You are funny, kind and smart. But I'm different. I wear a hearing aid." Elena stopped in front of the school, turned in her seat. "Matteo, look at me. We are all different. Some need glasses, others are allergic. You wear a hearing aid. That does not make you less. It makes you you." Matteo considered this seriously. Then he nodded. "Will you stay close?" "All day. I promise." The first week was difficult. Matteo struggled to follow conversations in noisy groups. He got frustrated when he did not understand instructions. But his teacher, Mrs. Fields, was patient and experienced. She adjusted her position so Matteo could always read her lips. She delivered written instructions along with verbal ones, and the children, with the natural acceptance of childhood, simply incorporated him. They discovered that Matteo was excellent at math, that he drew perfect planes, that he could imitate cartoon character voices. 1 month later, he had 3 best friends. Carmen improved constantly. The tests showed that the liver worked perfectly. She began to cook again, filling her new house with familiar smells. Javier visited every weekend, amazed by the transformation of his family. And Elena and Alejandro navigated their new territory with care. Stolen dinners, hands that brushed when serving dinner, looks that lasted a second longer than necessary, night conversations on the terrace when Matteo slept. They did not rush. Both knew that what they were building was too valuable to ruin with recklessness. 1. October afternoon, Matteo arrived from school with a note. The principal requested a meeting with the parents. Elena felt her stomach sink. "Did you do something bad?" "I don't think so," Matteo answered, genuinely confused. The next day, Alejandro and Elena sat in front of Principal Miller, a 60-year-old man with round glasses and a kind expression. "Thank you for coming. I wanted to talk about Matteo's extraordinary progress." Elena exhaled with relief. "He is exceeding all expectations." Miller continued. "His social adaptation, his academic performance, his emotional resilience. Frankly, it is inspiring." "He has a great teacher," Alejandro said. "He does, but he also has an exceptional family." Miller looked at both. "It shows. Children reflect the love they receive at home." Alejandro took Elena's hand over the table, without hiding. Miller smiled. "Matteo told me about you, about how Elena saved his hearing, about how his father teaches him piano, about how you are a family now, even if different from others. Does that bother you?" Elena asked, tense. "On the contrary, I find it beautiful." Miller leaned back. "Families come in all forms, Miss Morales. What matters is love, and you have that in abundance." When they left the school, Alejandro did not let go of Elena's hand. He led her to the car, opened the door, but before she entered, he turned her toward him. "Marry me." Elena blinked. "What?" "I don't have a ring. I didn't plan this. But hearing that man talk about our family," Alejandro took her face in his hands, "I want it to be official. I want Matteo to have a mother. I want to wake up every day knowing you are mine, and I am yours. Alejandro, if it's too soon, I will wait. If you need time, I will give it to you. But I need you to know this is real for me. You are real. We are real." Elena thought about the whole path traveled, in the desperate woman who crossed those iron gates a year ago, in the boy who cried in silence, in the man who had learned to live again. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes? Yes, I will marry you." Alejandro kissed her under the blue New York sky, in front of the school where his son learned to be happy, sealing a promise born of pain and cultivated with love. That night, they told Matteo, the boy screamed with joy, jumped on the bed, insisted that Elena's ring had to have diamonds the size of her head. Carmen cried tears of happiness. Javier hugged his sister, whispering that Isabel would be proud. And in the garden, the white roses kept blooming, silent witnesses that true love never dies, it only transforms. The wedding was held 6 months later, in April, when New York woke up under a blanket of flowers. It was not the social event expected of Alejandro Alvarez. It was intimate, 40 guests in the mansion garden under an arch covered in white roses. Elena walked on Javier's arm. She wore a simple ivory lace dress, her hair loose with small flowers woven in. Carmen cried in the front row, stronger and more radiant than ever. But the one who stole the attention was Matteo. As the ring-bearer, he wore a navy blue suit and a tie he had refused to let anyone tie, insisting on learning it alone. He walked with the solemnity of someone who understands the importance of the moment. When he handed over the rings, he whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Take good care of Dad, Elena. Sometimes he forgets to eat when he works." Laughter filled the garden. The judge who performed the ceremony was Dr. Hudson, who had obtained special certification for this day. His words were simple but deep. True love does not always come when we expect it. Sometimes it comes disguised as tragedy, as a test, as an impossibility. But when it arrives, when it truly arrives, it transforms everything it touches. Alejandro and Elena exchanged vows they had written themselves. Alejandro promised to honor Isabel's memory by loving Elena completely. Elena promised to be the mother Mateo deserved, and the companion Alejandro needed. When they kissed, Mateo clapped so hard his hearing aid let out a beep. Everyone laughed. The reception was happy and simple. Live music, food prepared by Carmen's favorite chef, dancing under the stars. Mateo played the piano for the first time in public, performing a simple melody he had composed called Sounds of Home. Near midnight, Elena escaped to the garden. She needed a moment of quiet to process that all this was real. Alejandro found her by the roses. Regretting it already? Never. Elena hugged him, just overwhelmed by happiness. I know the feeling. They stayed like that, under the moon, knowing they had overcome more obstacles in a year than many in a whole life. Thank you, Alejandro whispered. For what? For not giving up on Mateo. For believing when I couldn't. For teaching me that the heart has infinite capacity, if one has the courage to use it. Elena kissed him, a kiss that tasted of fulfilled promises and bright futures. Inside, Mateo looked out the window. Carmen moved closer, putting a hand on his shoulder. You have a mom now. I know. Mateo smiled. I always had her. We just took a little while to make it official. The following years brought transformations no one would have imagined. Alejandro decided to reduce his workload, delegating responsibilities to spend more time with his family. The mansion filled with life. 2 rescued dogs, a cat Mateo found in the street, plants Elena grew with devotion. But the most significant change came when Alejandro announced his decision at the family table. I want to adopt. Elena put down her fork. Adopt. Children with disabilities. Children who, like Mateo, need someone who believes in them. He looked at his wife. We have space. We have resources. We have love. Why not share it? Mateo, now 11 years old, intervened. I could teach them things. Like you taught me, Elena. Elena looked around the table. Her husband, her son, her mother who now lived. With them permanently, Javier who visited every Sunday. A family built from broken fragments that had fused into something beautiful. Yes, she said. Let's do it. 6 months later, 2 girls arrived at the mansion. Luna, 5 years old, with cerebral palsy, and Sophia, 7, blind from birth. Both came from the foster system, marked by years of neglect. Mateo became their most patient guide. He showed them that disability was not an end, but a difference. Elena taught them to navigate the world with confidence. Alejandro gave them the security they had never known. Carmen, with her new extended life, became the grandmother they all deserved. The mansion that was once a silent mausoleum now echoed with laughter, music, footsteps running through the hallways. Neighbors commented amazed on the transformation of that sad place. One summer day, 5 years after the wedding, Elena found Alejandro in the garden. He was planting more white roses. What are you doing? Isabel planted these. For Mateo. Now I plant more for Luna and Sophia, and for those who come after. Those who come after. Alejandro smiled. There are 3 more children on the waiting list. What do you say? Elena knelt next to him, digging her hands into the fertile earth. I say that this house finally is what it always should have been. A home. They worked together until the sun went down, planting roses that would bloom for generations, each a testimony of life, that arose where before there was only pain. That night during dinner, Mateo, now a 16-year-old teenager, announced his decision. I want to study medicine, audiology specifically, to help children like me. The silence that followed was full of pride. Elena had tears in her eyes. Your mother would be so proud, Alejandro said, his voice breaking. Both of them would be, Mateo corrected, looking at Elena. Because I have 2 mothers, one who gave me life, another who gave me sound. And both taught me to listen with my heart. Elena could not contain herself anymore. She moved around the table, hugging Mateo with the fierceness of a lioness. Alejandro wrapped them both. The girls joined, Carmen, Javier, a knot of arms and love. A family, not traditional, not perfect, but absolutely real. 10 years later, Elena Morales Alvarez was in the same garden where everything had started. She was 38 years old, but she felt decades younger than that desperate day when she crossed the gates searching for salvation. Now she supervised 7 children playing among the roses. Matteo, at 21, was studying his last year of medicine at Columbia University. Luna, at 15, shone in Paralympic swimming competitions. Sophia, at 17, composed music that moved everyone who heard it. And the 4 younger ones, who arrived in later years, each with their own battles and victories. The Isabel Alvarez Foundation, created in honor of Alejandro's first wife, now helped low-income families access medical treatments for children with disabilities. Elena directed it, using her experience to identify cases that others overlooked. Carmen, at 70 years old, was still the heart of the family. Her transplant had been a complete success. She joked, saying that God kept her alive to see all her grandchildren graduate. Alejandro came out of the house, more grey-haired, but with the bright eyes of a man at peace with himself. He wrapped his arm around Elena's waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About how far we've come. About how one decision to listen to a sob changed everything. It wasn't the decision, it was you, your courage, your love." Elena shook her head. "It was Matteo, that boy who suffered in silence but never stopped waiting for someone to truly see him." As if called by his name, Matteo appeared, still in his hospital scrubs. He now used a nearly invisible hearing aid, technology that had improved greatly in the last decade. "I have news," he announced, barely containing the emotion. "Good or bad?" Alejandro asked. "The best. I was accepted into the pediatric otology residency program at University Hospital. I will work with Dr. Hudson." Elena screamed with joy. Alejandro hugged his son hard. "He will be proud to have you," Alejandro said. "We are. I want to do for other children what you did for me," Matteo said, his voice firm. "I want no child to suffer 7 years in silence because the adults stopped looking for answers." That night, the whole family gathered to celebrate. The table was full. Carmen at the head, Javier with his new girlfriend, the 7 children, Elena and Alejandro, foundation workers who had become family. When they brought the cake, Matteo asked for silence. "I want to say something." He stood up. 14 years ago, I was a broken boy living in a world without sound. I suffered, and no one knew, until Elena arrived. He looked at his mother. "You saw what others ignored. You believed when others doubted. You fought when others gave up. You gave me something more valuable than hearing. You gave me hope." Tears ran freely down Elena's face. "And to you, Dad," Matteo continued, "you taught me that love is not perfect, but it can be unbreakable, that the mistakes of the past do not define the future, that family is not always blood, but choice." He turned to the girls and the little ones. "And to you, brothers and sisters, you taught me that my story was not unique, that we all have battles, that we all deserve to be seen, heard, loved." He raised his glass of juice to second chances, to the people who do not give up, to the families built with courage and love, and to the most beautiful sound in the world, the heartbeat of a heart that finally found its home. They all toasted, the glasses clinking in a symphony of hope. Later, when the children were sleeping and the guests had left, Elena and Alejandro walked through the garden under the stars. The white roses shone silver under the moon. "Did you ever imagine this?" Elena asked. "When you married Isabel?" "No, but I think she did." Alejandro stopped in front of the oldest rosebush. Isabel believed in happy endings. Maybe she knew that if she couldn't be here, she would send someone who could. Someone with heart enough to save our son and me. "I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I only opened a door. Sometimes that is all it takes. A person willing to open a door that others would keep closed." They kissed, gently, with the tenderness of those who have walked together, through the fire and emerged stronger. In his room, Matteo looked out the window at the garden. He no longer made paper planes. He no longer needed symbols of escape. But he kept all those planes in a special box, reminders of who he had been and how far he had come. He touched his right ear, no longer with pain but with gratitude. He could hear the night breeze. He could hear his own heart beating. And he knew, with the certainty that only comes from having lived on both sides of silence, that love had a sound. It was not loud or dramatic. It was the whisper of a mother putting you to bed. It was the laughter of a proud father. It was the chorus of siblings who accepted you exactly as you were. Love sounded like home, and Mateo Alvarez, the boy who once cried 7 years in silence, had finally learned to hear it. At dawn the next day, Elena found a letter on her pillow. With Mateo's careful handwriting, it said, "Mum, Elena, they say the miracle was that I got my hearing back. But the real miracle was you, a woman who chose to see the pain of a stranger when she had enough reasons to look the other way. You taught me that heroism does not always wear a cape. Sometimes it wears an apron. Sometimes it arrives exhausted from 3 jobs, but still finds the strength to kneel next to a boy who is suffering. Thank you for hearing my silence. Thank you for never giving up. Thank you for being the proof that love, when it is true, can heal what medicine cannot reach. With all my heart, that now knows how to beat with sound, your son Mateo." Elena read the letter 3 times, tears staining the paper. Alejandro found her like that, holding his son's words like the treasure they were. "Are you okay?" "More than okay. I am complete." And it was true. The woman who had entered the Alvarez mansion with the weight of the world on her shoulders now walked light, held by the love of a family she had helped build. The white roses would keep blooming every spring. The children would keep growing, laughing, filling every corner of that house with life. And the story of a boy who cried in silence and the woman who dared to listen would be told for generations, not as a legend, but as a reminder that true love does not need words to be heard. It only needs a heart willing to see, hands willing to act, and faith enough to believe that even in the deepest silence, there is always hope for a new dawn.